So we've been very closely monitoring the delivery of the program as chair of the National Management Group and as also a key party to all of the governance program and also the technical committee. We've also been working with Queensland and the program specifically by providing compliance and enforcement officers, some assistance around communications.
You've been providing them to Queensland?
Yes, we have.
What are their duties? What are their duties?
So to provide, for example, assistance on a compliance and enforcement framework, noting that there were a number of detections of importance, having a look at the sort of compliance and enforcement activities done around that, and also working with the program to assess the triggers and the risks, if any of them are being met as a result of the detections. Also working with them to strengthen communications and looking at the messaging that's getting out, particularly some of the success stories, but also some of the targeting of the right messages. And then also, because we are the National Management Group Committee Chair, providing some advice on governance and cost-sharing arrangement. So we work very closely with them to monitor the program, given that there is a significant investment, but also given that we do have that national coordination role in the governance.
Okay, that's where I'd like to go with this, because we do provide a lot of money from the federal taxpayers providing a lot of money for this Queensland program, largely Queensland. Is this government aware of the overreach and intimidating tactics being taken by the states and breaches of regulations on pesticides, particularly in southeast Queensland, sad to say, forcing their way into properties and causing fear and distress to landowners, upsetting women and terrifying crying children? Are you aware of that?
No, we're not, Senator.
Well, it's going on. That's rife. Since when is it okay for gates and fences to be broken down with police presence, threatening those with reasonable excuses who withhold consent to strangers forcing their way onto properties, with the view to unlawfully spreading poison when there is not a fire ant within Kui, in breach of the pesticide regulations? Are you aware of that?
No, Senator.
This is exactly what happened recently at Beachmont and Laidley and other places, when property was damaged and officers behaved like criminals in a home invasion while trespassing on private land. The violence came from the officers, not the landowners. I've talked with the landowners. Are you aware of that?
Senator, we've got no evidence to suggest unlawful or misconduct by the program in undertaking their compliance activities.
Can I send you evidence?
Of course, Senator.
Okay, thank you. A property owner, are you aware that a property owner may obstruct and refuse access to officers if they have a reasonable excuse?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Senator?
Are you aware that a property owner may obstruct and refuse access to officers, that's fire and eradication program officers, if they have a reasonable excuse?
To be honest, I don't know the specifics of the legislation under which the program operates in terms of the compliance enforcement. There's state laws, and the questions better directed at state government.
Well, the Biosecurity Act says that they can have a reasonable excuse, and then they cannot go onto the property.
We're not applying the Commonwealth Biosecurity Act in relation to this program.
State.
I'm not familiar with their legislation, Senator.
Do you think it's a reasonable excuse to obstruct when a resident has an illness such as asthma or other respiratory ailments confirmed by a medical certificate, likely to be made worse by exposure to toxic chemicals, particularly when being sprayed?
Senator, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on facts that I'm not familiar with, and are the responsibility of state jurisdiction.
Minister, is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals present represent a threat to domestic animals, dogs, cats, birds, if they're exposed to the toxic chemicals?
I'm not aware of those circumstances, Senator Roberts.
Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals are not being administered according to the safety requirements under the permits issued by the APVMA?
Again, I'm not aware of any existences of that.
Thank you for your truthfulness. It's very helpful. And I'm not trying to have a gotcha moment, but...
Mate, strap yourself in, because what unfolded in Senate estimates last week wasn't just another bureaucratic circus. It was a full-blown comedy of ignorance starring the people who are supposedly running Australia's fire and eradication program. And let me tell you, if this wasn't caught on record, you'd think it was satire. So here's the setup. Senator Malcolm Roberts sits down with a couple of big names from the department, Minister Chisholm and Acting Secretary Justine Saunders. The topic? Fire ants. Those nasty, invasive little buggers chewing up southeast Queensland. But the real infestation, it turns out, isn't just the ants, it's the mountain of bureaucratic incompetence surrounding them. Before we unpack this fire ant fiasco, where Albo's bureaucrats play dumb, taxpayers foot the bill, and Queensland cops a chemical storm, smash that like button like you're swatting every clueless bureaucrat in Canberra. Subscribe if you're done watching politicians act shocked about their own mess. And grab the Who Voted for This shirt, links in the description. Now, the department bigwigs start off all smiles. You know the drill, calm, polished, corporate politeness that's been focus grouped within an inch of its life. They say they're working closely with Queensland operatives, that they're monitoring delivery and providing national coordination. All the buzzwords lined up neatly like shiny ants marching in formation. But then, Senator Roberts, bless him, starts lifting the rug, and out crawls the truth. And what he reveals is enough to make any Aussie's blood boil faster than a kettle at smoko time. He starts asking the hard stuff. He brings up the on-the-ground reports, the overreach and intimidating tactics from officers in Queensland. We're talking stories of gates being busted down, fences smashed, people's private properties invaded by government contractors armed with pesticides and power. He's saying there are women crying, kids terrified, police present at these so-called eradication operations, all under the banner of the government's biosecurity crusade. And what do the bureaucrats say? No, we're not aware of that, Senator. Of course they're not aware. Because, like most bureaucrats, they're not the ones out there in the field. They're not the ones standing on someone's farm, telling them to shut up while chemicals are dumped on their land. They're sitting in Canberra, sipping flat whites and running national management groups. So Roberts keeps pressing. He's calm but sharp, like a bloke who's had enough of the spin. He describes these incidents. Property damage, fear, intimidation, basically government thuggery dressed up as biosecurity enforcement. And when he asks, "Are you aware of that?" Ms. Saunders replies again, "No, Senator." Chisholm chimes in with the same, "No, Senator." It's like watching two wind-up dolls repeating their preloaded script. Now, here's the bit that really grinds your gears. Roberts brings up the fact that property owners have a legal right to refuse entry if they've got a reasonable excuse. He's quoting the Biosecurity Act, which actually allows people to say, "Hang on, mate, I don't consent to this." But when he asks the acting secretary if she's aware of that law, she says, "I don't know the specifics." Wait, you're the one overseeing compliance, governance, national management, but you don't know the law governing the very thing you're enforcing. That's like a copper saying he's never read the road rules. Roberts pushes again. What if someone's got asthma or respiratory illness and the pesticides could make them sick? Is that a reasonable excuse? They dodge it. What if the chemicals kill pets, dogs, cats, birds? They dodge it. What if the chemicals aren't being applied according to safety permits? They dodge that too. They're not just dodging questions, they're dodging responsibility. And mate, if ignorance was a sport, this lot would have just taken gold for Australia. Now, let's talk about these chemicals. Roberts mentions a permit number, 87,728, which literally says you can't apply the pesticide as a preventive measure. You can only use it where ants actually exist. But, according to locals, aerial spraying is happening in areas where no fire ants have ever been found. In plain English, they're bombing empty paddocks, spreading poison for no reason. And when Roberts asks if they're aware of that, they say, "You guessed it. No, Senator." He even mentions environmental damage in the Samford Valley, a stunning spot near Brisbane, home to native wildlife and waterways that should be protected, not poisoned. He says these chemicals have wiped out native insects, marine life, reptiles, a total disaster. And what do they say? I'm not aware of that. Every answer is the same, a bland, bureaucratic, not aware. You can practically hear the viewers at home screaming at the screen. How are you not aware? That's your job. And this is where the frustration hits boiling point. Because these aren't minor oversights. This isn't someone forgetting to send an email. This is federal money, taxpayer money, funding a program that's trampling people's rights and potentially harming the environment, while the people in charge sit there pretending it's all news to them. And where's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in all this? Oh, he's busy flying around talking about strong leadership and climate commitments, while back home, his departments are spreading chemicals over innocent people's land and then shrugging when asked about it. Classic Albo government style. Talk tough, act blind. Let's be real, this whole mess reeks of the same bureaucratic rot that Aussies are sick of. Canberra loves to throw money at programs, slap on a national strategy, and then walk away once the photo op's done. The fire anti-eradication program has been running for years, decades even, and yet here we are, still fighting the same ants, while the officials running it don't even know what laws apply. And the kicker? When Roberts asks if the department will pay compensation to people affected by all this, the damaged property, the environmental mess, the stress and fear, they say, "No comment, Senator. No comment." That's government speak for, "We know we stuffed up, but we're not about to admit it." It's the kind of arrogance that's become a trademark of the Albanese era. Albo gets up in front of the cameras and talks about listening to Australians, about being accountable. But when his own ministers and department heads are caught flat-footed, they act like it's none of their business. Let's not forget, these programs run on federal funds. That means your money, my money, everyone's taxes going into a scheme that can't even tell you if they're breaking the law or poisoning ecosystems. It's the same old story. Bureaucrats drawing fat paychecks while ordinary Aussies deal with the fallout. People's pets dying, their gardens poisoned, their fences smashed, and all for a program that still hasn't eradicated a single bloody pest in 20 years. And look, nobody is saying we shouldn't deal with fire ants. They're a real problem. They're aggressive, destructive, and they can wreak havoc on farmland. But the way this is being handled? It's a joke. It's heavy-handed, poorly managed, and completely out of touch with reality. Albo loves to talk about respecting communities, yet under his watch, Queenslanders are being bullied on their own land. He's always banging on about protecting the environment, but his departments are dumping poison where no ants even exist. And when asked why, the people responsible say they're not aware. How's that for leadership? You can see the frustration in Roberts' voice during the hearing. He's not yelling. He's not grandstanding. He's just trying to get some straight answers and getting none. He even tells them, politely, that he's not looking for a gotcha moment. He just wants accountability. But they treat his questions like an inconvenience. That's the thing about bureaucrats. They're trained to sound competent while saying absolutely nothing. You could ask them if water's wet and they'd say, "We'll take that on notice, Senator." And the worst part? These are the people Albanese relies on. These are his frontline experts, his trusted public servants. But watching that hearing, you can't help thinking, if this is the best we've got, we're in serious trouble. Because while Albo's out there lecturing the public about trust in government, his departments can't even answer basic questions about who's responsible when something goes wrong. They hide behind state jurisdiction and legislative specifics. But when federal money's being spent, it's everyone's business. Imagine you're a Queensland farmer watching this unfold. You've had strangers barge onto your property, break your gates, spray chemicals around your animals, and then vanish without explanation. You finally see your story brought up in the Senate, and the people in charge shrug and say they've seen no evidence. It's infuriating. It's this exact kind of behaviour that drives the wedge deeper between Canberra and the people who actually live with the consequences. And Albanese can't keep hiding behind the excuse that it's a state issue. If the Commonwealth's funding it, it's his issue. If his ministers are being questioned about it, it's his issue. If Aussie families are being threatened or harmed because of it, it's definitely his issue. You can't take the credit for every national success and then duck responsibility when things go south. But that's what we're seeing, the great Australian government tradition of passing the buck. Now, Roberts ends the hearing in a way that says it all. He thanks them for their truthfulness. You can almost hear the sarcasm dripping off it. He tells them he'll get people to send in evidence, because clearly they're not looking for it themselves. And that's the most damning part of the whole thing. It's not just that there's mismanagement, it's that there's no curiosity to fix it. The bureaucrats aren't even interested in finding out whether the program they're running is doing harm. They're just following the process, ticking the boxes, filing the reports. Meanwhile, the fire ants are still marching on. And the people of Queensland? They're left with busted fences, sick pets, and a government that couldn't care less. So here's the takeaway, mate. When you hear politicians talk about national coordination or strategic oversight, remember this hearing. Remember that behind every glossy press release is a committee of people who don't know what's happening in their own programs. And remember that under Anthony Albanese's government, accountability is as rare as a bureaucrat with common sense. Because while Albo's busy spinning stories about unity and progress, Aussies on the ground are the ones paying for Canberra's ignorance, literally. And maybe that's the real infestation here. Not the fire ants in the soil, but the bureaucratic termites eating away at trust, responsibility, and competence in our institutions. The ants, at least, are predictable. They swarm, they sting, they destroy. The bureaucrats? They smile, they nod, and they deny. So next time you hear Albanese talking about how Australia's getting things done, remember this Senate hearing, where getting things done apparently means having no idea what's being done at all. Because right now, it looks like the only thing being eradicated in Queensland isn't the fire ants, it's accountability. And until someone in Canberra pulls their head out of the sand, we'll keep seeing the same story. Bureaucrats acting ignorant, ministers dodging blame, and ordinary Aussies left cleaning up the mess. So here's to you, Senator Roberts, for at least shining a torch on this nest of bureaucratic bludgers. And here's a message to Albo. Mate, maybe it's time to stop the spin, roll up your sleeves, and actually listen to the people dealing with the fallout of your government's ignorance. Because if you can't even control your departments, how are you going to control a country, let alone a colony of fire ants? Smash that like button if you enjoyed watching the government try to explain its way out of a burning paper trail. Subscribe if you reckon accountability shouldn't be a rare event. And as always, keep your eyes open, your beers cold, and your politicians on a short leash. Because if we don't hold them accountable, no one will. Oh, and grab who voted for this shirt. Links in the description.